This envelope changed everything. My mother slid it across the white linen tablecloth, her sapphire ring catching the candlelight. My sister leaned in, phone ready, pretending this was a moment worth capturing. The restaurant fell quiet. The violinist in the corner hesitated mid-stroke. Inside that envelope wasn't a check or a congratulations card. It was a disownment letter signed by all three of them. My graduation present. I folded it once, twice, and stood up. No tears, no screaming, just silence and the weight of paper in my hand. They thought they'd written my ending. They didn't realize they'd just triggered their own. Stay until the end. You'll see how silence can rewrite everything. Growing up, I learned early that love in the Harrington household came with conditions attached. My father, Richard Harrington, measured worth in profit margins and stock portfolios. My mother, Victoria, measured it in social capital and appearances. My sister, Claire, just happened to be the golden ratio of both. At charity galas, I was always introduced last. Claire is a junior partner at Whitmore and Associates, my mother would announce, her hand resting proudly on my sister's shoulder. Then her voice would soften, almost apologetically. And this is Sophia. She's still in school. The same pause, the same tight smile, as if I were an unfinished project still awaiting quality control. Guests would nod, glance at me briefly, then redirect their attention to the champagne fountain. I learned to smile back, quietly, predictably. Our dining room always smelled of mahogany polish and unspoken expectations. The crystal chandelier above the marble table threw fractured light across the stemware, scattering reflections that never quite settled. I used to count them, tiny broken prisms, while my father discussed hedge funds and acquisitions, and my mother rehearsed gratitude speeches for donors who mistook networking for generosity. Claire thrived in that ecosystem. She'd mastered the art of gliding between conversations, knowing exactly when to laugh softly, when to tilt her head just enough to appear fascinated. I studied her like she was a case study. Every gesture earned approval. Every pause was perfectly timed. I, on the other hand, worked evenings at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop near Northwestern's campus. The espresso machine hissed louder than any conversation at home ever did. There, people didn't care about family names or trust funds. They just wanted their macchiatos made right and their names spelled correctly on the cup. I appreciated that simplicity. It was measurable, clean, honest. One Tuesday after a particularly brutal shift, I came home to find Claire perched at the kitchen island, her MacBook open, my father pouring Cabernet into crystal glasses. "We were just discussing you," he said, swirling the wine slowly. "Claire thinks you're squandering your potential behind a coffee counter." Claire didn't look up from her screen. "It's not squandering, Dad. It's character building." Her tone was light, but the condescension was unmistakable, sharp enough to cut through the filtered air. I laughed softly, refusing to let it land. "I'm paying my own tuition," I said evenly. My father shrugged. "Degrees don't generate wealth, Sophia. Strategic positioning does. Remember that." I wanted to remind him that I understood strategic positioning better than anyone at that table, that I could analyze systems, identify inefficiencies, build predictive models. But his attention had already drifted back to Claire. After that evening, I stopped trying to join their discussions. I just started observing, collecting data in the methodical way that made sense to me. Still, there were moments I thought maybe things would shift. Like when I received the Kellogg Innovation Fellowship, a full scholarship with a research stipend. I forwarded them the email, attached the university press release, waited for acknowledgement. My mother responded 7 hours later, "So proud, sweetheart. We have the Metropolitan Museum benefit tonight. Can we celebrate this weekend?" They never did. That was the day I understood something fundamental and unchangeable. In my family, attention was currency, and I was perpetually operating at a deficit. I remember the sound of those crystal glasses that night, how they clinked in perfect rhythm, as if the house itself was toasting my invisibility. That was the night I learned my place in this family, somewhere between background noise and footnote. 3 days before graduation, a message appeared in the family group chat. A reservation link. Lou Bernardine, the same Manhattan restaurant my mother reserved for every milestone that wasn't mine. The message was clinical. Pre-graduation dinner for Sophia. Business casual attire. No emoji, no warmth, just an obligation wrapped in scheduling. I clicked through. My name wasn't even listed on the reservation. The confirmation read, "The Harrington Party, Richard, Victoria, Claire." That omission wasn't an oversight. It was a declaration. 40 minutes later, Claire texted separately. "Don't read into it. It's just how their system formats reservations." Formatting. That word echoed in my head for hours. That's what I'd become to them, a formatting error, easily deleted. That evening, I sat at my desk in my studio apartment, the Manhattan skyline glittering against the window like scattered diamonds. My inbox glowed with unread notifications from venture capitalists, classmates, professors. Achievements, recognitions, opportunities. None of it mattered when the people who defined your worth still measured you in silence. I scrolled through old family photographs saved on my phone. Aspen ski trips, Hampton summers, Wall Street Journal features. My mother's impeccable posture, my father's calculated smile, Claire's practiced charm, and me, always positioned at the frame's edge, half lit, half erased. It wasn't new. It was just the first time I saw it without hoping it would change. The next morning, I received an email from the dean's office confirming my speaking slot at commencement. My advisor, Dr. Anderson, had nominated me for the Emerging Leader in Technology Award. She wrote, "This is your moment, Sophia. Own it quietly." Quietly. That word felt like an anchor, something solid in a world constructed from glass and pretense. I closed my laptop and exhaled slowly. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in clean geometric lines. I started noticing how precise everything in my space had become. The coffee mug aligned perpendicular to my notebook. Papers organized by project and date. The clock on my desk ticking steady, metronomic. My life wasn't chaos. It was structured, just not by them anymore. I smiled then. The kind of smile you wear when the evidence has already been compiled and the outcome is inevitable. The night before the dinner, New York hummed beneath the weight of late spring rain. My apartment windows fogged at the corners, the glass trembling with each passing subway train underground. Inside, everything existed in perfect order. Documents aligned, laptop screens casting soft blue light across the hardwood. I brewed fresh coffee, the aroma cutting through the storm outside, sharp, grounding, familiar. My fingers moved across the keyboard in rhythm with the rain. Each spreadsheet entry, every contract filed, was another quiet act of documentation. I'd stopped trying to justify myself months ago. Justifications were for people who expected to be understood. Documentation was for people who intended to be vindicated. So I kept records. Every scholarship application, every award notification, every line of code from my project, Route Logic. What started as a graduate thesis assignment had evolved into something tangible, a logistics optimization platform that helped regional delivery companies minimize fuel costs and maximize efficiency. My classmate Brandon handled the financial modeling. Another teammate, Nina, designed the user interface. And I, the barista with an MBA from Kellogg, had written the core algorithm. It wasn't flashy, but it functioned flawlessly. The breakthrough happened one dawn, hours before sunrise, when I ran a simulation that reduced delivery costs by 18%. I remember leaning back in my desk chair, staring at those numbers. Proof. Quantifiable, irrefutable proof. By the time Northwestern's startup competition arrived, Route Logic was ready. Dr. Anderson stopped me backstage before my presentation. "You don't need to perform," she said. "Just demonstrate how it works. Let the data tell the story." It did. When my presentation concluded, applause erupted, polite initially, then genuine. Among the audience stood a man in a charcoal Tom Ford suit. Daniel Preston, CEO of Atlas Freight Solutions. He approached afterward, his demeanor measured, his interest authentic. "You've built something genuinely scalable," he said, studying the projections on my tablet. "But more importantly, something ethical." Ethical. A word I hadn't heard applied to business in years. We met twice after that initial conversation. The third time, he slid a leather portfolio across the conference table. Inside was a letter of intent. Atlas wanted to acquire Route Logic for $7.4 million, plus a director-level position for me post-graduation. I didn't sign immediately. I reviewed every clause, every subsection, every liability provision. I wanted absolute certainty that the system I'd built, the one constructed from determination, not privilege, would remain intact. When I finally signed, it wasn't euphoria I felt. It was equilibrium. From that moment forward, I started building my own archive. Digital backups of every document, timestamped and encrypted. Wire transfer confirmations, licensing agreements, employment contracts, the kind of paper trail that doesn't just narrate a story, it seals it legally. The night I received the final acquisition confirmation, I printed the contract. The sound of paper sliding from the printer was cleaner than any applause I'd ever received. That's when I opened the family group chat for the first time in weeks. The most recent message was from my mother, a photo of Claire at some legal industry gala, captioned, "Pride doesn't begin to describe it." I typed a simple response, confirmed for graduation dinner. I'll be there. No emoji, no elaboration, just confirmation. After that, I cleaned my apartment the way I always did before significant moments. Every object had its designated place. Every surface reflected symmetry. My offer letter, my diploma folder, and a small card I'd saved since childhood, a faded birthday note my mother once gave me with "To my little dreamer" written inside. I placed the new documents beneath it, the ink fresh, the paper substantial. Midnight arrived quietly. I closed my laptop, finished the last of the coffee, and watched the city lights ripple across the Hudson River. I thought about the upcoming dinner, their rehearsed smiles, the cameras, the performance. For the first time, I wasn't anxious. They would present their letter, believing it would define me. What they didn't know was that I'd already signed something far more permanent, my independence. I fell asleep with that certainty. The rain had stopped. The silence that followed felt almost ceremonial. The next morning, I woke before dawn. First light caught the corner of my desk, reflecting off the silver binder clip holding my contracts together. I touched the paper lightly, grounding myself in its reality. I didn't dress for them. I dressed for documentation. Tailored navy blazer, hair pulled back precisely, neutral tones throughout. The kind of appearance that doesn't beg to be noticed but commands to be remembered. Before leaving, I positioned my coffee mug exactly 1 inch from my laptop's edge. Habit. Order. Proof. I locked the door behind me. Manhattan streets were still damp from overnight rain, reflections stretching across the asphalt like liquid mirrors. My reflection stared back from a passing taxi's window. Calm. Composed. Someone I recognized for the first time in years. When I arrived outside Le Bernardin, I paused before the glass doors. Inside, I could already see the faint shimmer of chandeliers, my mother's silhouette, the familiar angle of Claire's head as she adjusted her phone's camera settings. I breathed once, steadily. They believed tonight was their stage. They had no comprehension that the script had already been rewritten, signed, sealed, notarized. This time, I wasn't walking into their performance. I was walking into evidence. The hostess smiled when she saw me. "Harrington party?" she asked. Her tone was professional, but I caught the flicker of confusion when she couldn't locate my name on the reservation list. I nodded anyway. "Yes," I said. "They're expecting me." Inside, the air smelled of seared scallops and expensive detachment. My family occupied the corner table beneath a halo of chandelier light. My mother waved as if this were a reunion, not an ambush. Claire raised her phone slightly, framing her shot. "Sophia, darling," my mother said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "We have something special for you tonight." A server appeared, setting a pristine cream envelope beside my plate. My father cleared his throat, practiced authority filling the silence. "It's time we all moved forward," he announced. My mother's smile widened. "From all of us," she added, her hand gesturing to include Claire. Claire's camera captured everything, the envelope sliding across linen, my expression unreadable, carefully neutral. I opened it slowly, deliberately. The paper was heavy, embossed, legal. "We, the undersigned, hereby release and relinquish all familial obligations and ties with Sophia Marie Harrington, effective immediately." It was signed by each of them. Signatures perfect, loops practiced, final. This was my graduation gift. The table watched, waiting for a scene. Perhaps tears, perhaps raised voices, perhaps collapse. But I'd already experienced the real devastation privately, months ago. I folded the paper once, twice, then placed it carefully beside my water glass. "Thank you," I said. My tone was even, deliberate, controlled. Claire blinked. "You're Thanking us? I met her gaze without flinching. The air between us tightened, thin as crystal. My father shifted in his chair uncomfortably. My mother's hand hovered uncertainly over her wine glass. Claire lowered her phone slightly, suddenly unsure what she was documenting anymore. Sophia, my mother said softly, attempting to regain control. You don't have to make this more difficult than, but I was already reaching into my bag. I pulled out a folder, the same neutral gray as the portfolio Daniel had used when he'd handed me the acquisition contract. I placed it on the table and opened it toward them, pages facing outward. Inside was the acquisition announcement. The Atlas Freight Solutions letterhead gleamed under the restaurant's lighting. Beneath it, my name printed in professional typeface, Director of Strategic Operations, Route Logic Integration Lead. For a moment, absolute silence. The background music shifted songs, unaware it was scoring a funeral. Claire leaned forward, reading faster, her expression transforming from confusion to recognition. This is yours? Yes. My father frowned, the expression he reserved for underperforming investments. You sold it? I built it, I said quietly. Then I sold it. The deal closed last Thursday. My mother tried to recover her composure, her social training kicking in automatically. We didn't know you were working on something like this. I know, I said simply. It was the first time I'd ever witnessed my mother truly speechless. Claire's phone remained in her hand, but the recording light had gone dark. My father reached for his wine glass, but his grip faltered slightly, enough for the stem to clink audibly against the marble tabletop. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile triumphantly. I simply stood, smoothing my blazer with practiced calm. You can keep that letter, I said, sliding their disownment document back across the table toward them. I already have my own. The irony landed perfectly, quietly, devastatingly. Behind me, I heard Claire whisper something, maybe an apology, maybe a curse, but I didn't turn back. As I reached the restaurant's entrance, soft piano music filled the void they'd left behind. I paused with one hand on the doorframe, Manhattan's lights reflecting in the glass before me. In that reflection, I saw them still seated there, surrounded by the world they'd constructed, gleaming, polished, hollow. Outside, the air was colder than I'd anticipated. It smelled like rain and liberation. I checked my phone. New messages from Atlas. Notifications from business journals already covering the acquisition. Proof. All timestamped, all documented. The envelope in my hand felt lighter now. Just paper and ink, nothing more substantial. They had given me their silence years ago, taught me to live within it. Tonight, I'd returned it, perfected, weaponized, complete. The night air off the Hudson felt sharper than usual, clean enough to rinse away everything that had clung to me inside that restaurant. The city pulsed beyond the glass towers, indifferent, alive, endless. I walked without hurry, the sound of my heels folding into the rhythm of passing traffic. Each step carried less weight than the one before. When I reached my apartment building, the sky had thinned into early dawn, that particular shade of blue that exists only briefly before true morning. Pale light spilled through my windows, painting quiet geometry across the hardwood floor. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter next to my framed degree, still in its university packaging. Their letter looked insignificant beside the new one, Atlas's offer, embossed, final, signed. 2 documents, 2 versions of my name. One they'd erased, one they could never touch. I made coffee as always, pouring it slowly, steadily, listening to the familiar sounds. The mug clicked softly against the granite countertop. That sound had become my pulse, measured, controlled, alive on my own terms. I didn't reread their letter. It had already served its purpose, a timestamp marking the exact moment I stopped asking to belong. Now it would sit preserved, flattened between achievements that couldn't be deleted or discounted. My phone vibrated once on the counter. A text from Claire. We didn't mean it like that. Can we talk? Please? I stared at it for a long moment. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then I turned the phone face down on the counter. Some messages aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to echo into silence until they understand what silence actually means. The light shifted warmer as morning arrived fully. Outside, the city stretched awake, delivery trucks, joggers, the rhythm of another ordinary day. I opened the window, letting fresh air circulate through the apartment. Somewhere below, a subway screeched against its tracks, metal on metal, raw and honest. In the window's reflection, I saw a woman who no longer needed to explain why she was standing there alone, why she'd chosen this path, why she'd documented everything so carefully. I picked up their letter one final time, folded it with precision, and slid it behind the frame of my diploma. Not hidden, just positioned in proper order. Evidence of what was. Proof of what changed. The air in the room steadied. My shoulders settled. Silence, at last, didn't feel empty or forced. It felt earned, chosen, mine. Revenge didn't sound like screaming or confrontation. It sounded like calm breathing in a quiet room, like coffee brewing at dawn, like paper sliding into a frame. The kind of silence you choose for yourself, not the kind imposed upon you by others. Families break loudly, with slammed doors and raised voices, with accusations hurled across dinner tables and relationships severed in moments of heat. But peace? Peace rebuilds quietly. It rebuilds in morning routines and careful documentation, in contracts signed and futures secured without permission or approval. They wrote me out of their narrative, assigned me the role of failure, of disappointment, of the daughter who never quite measured up. But I became the footnote they'll never erase, the chapter they can't revise, the proof that their assessment was catastrophically wrong. Some stories don't end with forgiveness or reconciliation. They end with clarity, with understanding exactly who people are and what they value, then building your life accordingly. That clarity doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't need explanations or justifications. It simply exists, solid and immovable, like foundation stones supporting everything you build afterward. If you've ever been the quiet one in the room, the one everyone underestimated, the one whose achievements were footnotes in someone else's story, this one's for you. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender or acceptance or defeat. Sometimes silence is strategy, the most powerful kind. It's watching while others perform. It's building while others critique. It's documenting while others dismiss. And when the moment arrives, when they hand you their verdict on your worth, their final judgment on your value, you can simply place your own documentation on the table and walk away. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just with proof. The morning after that dinner, I received 17 messages. 12 from Claire, ranging from defensive to pleading. 3 from my mother, carefully worded, asking if we could discuss this like adults. 2 from my father's assistant, requesting a meeting at his earliest convenience. I responded to none of them. Instead, I forwarded my new work email to Dr. Anderson with a simple note: "Thank you for teaching me that data speaks louder than words." She responded within the hour: "You were always going to be extraordinary. I just helped you see it." Graduation arrived 4 days later. I walked across that stage in front of 3,000 people. My family's seats, the ones they'd confirmed months ago, remained empty. I noticed, briefly, then let it go. Because in the audience sat Dr. Anderson, Brandon, and Nina from my team, Daniel Preston from Atlas, and dozens of classmates who'd watched me build something real from nothing but determination and caffeine. When they called my name for the technology award, the applause was genuine. No performance. No pretense. Just recognition. That evening, I sat in my apartment with takeout Thai food and cheap champagne, exactly as I'd planned. No fancy restaurant. No family drama. Just me and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that everything I'd built myself. My phone sat silent on the counter, 13 unread messages glowing on the screen. I didn't check them. Some questions answer themselves when you stop responding. Some relationships end not with confrontation but with absence. The week after graduation, I started at Atlas. My office overlooked the East River, with a view that stretched from the Brooklyn Bridge to the Statue of Liberty. On my desk, I placed 3 items: my diploma, a photo of Dr. Anderson and me at the awards ceremony, and that faded birthday card my mother had given me years ago, to my little dreamer. Not as nostalgia. As evidence. Evidence that I'd been seen once, briefly, before I became inconvenient to their narrative. And evidence that I'd seen myself clearly enough to build something they never imagined possible. Months passed. The texts from Claire eventually stopped. My mother's carefully crafted emails dwindled to holiday greetings, then nothing. My father never reached out personally, just had his assistant send a generic congratulations card when a business journal featured Route Logic's success. I kept that card too, filed appropriately. One afternoon in November, I saw Claire across the street in Midtown, power walking between meetings, phone pressed to her ear. For a moment, our eyes met. She stopped walking. I nodded once, neutrally, then continued on my way. No conversation necessary. No closure required. Just acknowledgement that we now existed in separate orbits, as we probably always should have. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things ended, if I wish I'd handled that dinner differently, if I miss having a family. I tell them the truth, I don't regret documentation. I don't regret proof. I don't regret walking away from people who'd already walked away from me years before, just without the paperwork. What I built in that silence, the career, the independence, the life that's entirely mine, that's worth more than any performance of belonging ever could be. Because here's what I learned in that restaurant, in that moment when they slid their verdict across white linen, the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And the opposite of belonging isn't rejection. It's self-sufficiency. They gave me rejection wrapped in legal language. I gave myself everything else. Some stories don't end with families reunited or lessons learned or growth on all sides. Some stories end with one person walking out of a restaurant, envelope in hand, knowing exactly who they are and what they're worth, regardless of who agrees. And sometimes that's not just an ending. Sometimes that's freedom. The kind that doesn't announce itself with trumpets or celebration. The kind that sounds like a door closing softly, like footsteps fading into city noise, like silence that finally, completely, belongs to you.